Hi, this is Betsy Sawyer Galen, and welcome to Ready to Heal. My guest today is David Joseph Alpert. He's a practitioner of a number of different healing methods. The one that you started with, right? You're a licensed professional counselor.
Yes.
Correct? So now tell me a little bit about yourself and how did you get started?
Okay. Well, I've been a counselor professionally for 30 years, and I got started as a counselor by training with Carl Rogers, a famous psychologist in American psychological history, and he was a humanistic and transpersonal and relational psychologist. And I trained with him and his colleagues in California, and had a breakthrough.
And now, were you from California, or how
No,
did you happen to go out there?
I was living in Massachusetts, and then I applied to the program, the Carl Rogers Institute for Psychotherapy Research and Supervision, and I attended that training program after my master's in college, graduate school. I went for postgraduate training in psychotherapy.
Oh.
Yeah.
And so now you've practiced that along with some other methods that you use, right?
Right. So I had a really deep, profound transformational experience as a student in that program because of its power. And I came back and got trained in therapeutic touch, a method of derived from laying on of hands that involves no physical contact, but it's developed by the professor of nursing at New York University, former professor of nursing at New York University, Dolores Krieger, and I was trained in therapeutic touch by her, Janet McCrae, who was also a scholar in that field. And so that helped me get into the concept of energy work.
And what is therapeutic touch?
So it's an off-the-body system where you feel the energy field of another human being and support the flow within the energy field.
And so, tell me about that. What is the energy field?
So everybody doesn't stop at the body. Just like you'll notice if someone's approaching you physically before they touch you, you can feel it because you have an energy field. We're just not used to paying attention to it. It's often called an electromagnetic field around the body. And so you can sense that with the palm of your hand, and you can feel people's energy and whether there's a flow to that energy or whether there's breaks in that flow.
Oh. And now what made you, were you aware of that before you studied it, or how did you think of studying that particular method?
Well, as I said, I had had a very deep, profound transformation in my training as a counselor, and it awakened me to spiritual aspects of reality that I hadn't been paying attention to previous to that. And I came back to Massachusetts, and just lo and behold, you know, when you're ready for the teacher appears. The teacher appeared. There was somebody who was teaching an introductory course in therapeutic touch. I took it, and I took more and more training, several years of intensive training in therapeutic touch.
So I want to, when you're saying you're aware of is this and it just makes me think of a person who's blind, who develops other senses because they can't see. This is a sense that they would have much more be more innately aware of it because they don't have the vision, but they use their hearing and their other senses that kind of bring that out. Mm-hmm. So now give me an example of is that a method that you use a lot?
Well, it's something I might use as needed. I try to give each person exactly what they need when they need it, because everybody's at a different part of their process of healing and transformation. So each person needs something different. It's sort of the way different people eat different foods, different times of the day, different days of the week, or different people eat different foods than other people. Uh-huh. Everybody needs different nourishment.
So give me an example of something that you would treat with therapeutic touch? Yeah.
Well, it could be you could treat anything, emotional distress, you could treat physical distress. You can assess the field. Wherever you find blockage in the flow of field's energy, what you can do is then just help support the unruffling of that field. In other words, you unruffle it, you make it open, and then the field flows, and it restores electromagnetic harmony to the field around the body, and then that interpenetrates with the emotional level, the physical level, the cognitive level. So people find a lot of rest, peace from that kind of intervention typically.
And does it take one treatment? Does it take multiple treatments?
Well, it depends what you're trying to treat. If you're just treating a minor discomfort at the time, you can, if you're just tired, you could probably get woken up by having a little bit of energy work done on you, therapeutic touch done on you. But if you have a major problem, I've worked with people who had fibroid growths, and they came several months, and the fibroid growths diminished in size. It's no guarantee that it would, because everybody's healing process is unique.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So now how do you develop a sense, for therapeutic touch? Like to say I want to learn what you're doing, or I
Right.
want to just have a better idea, like how are you assessing?
So if you were a student, you were learning therapeutic touch, one thing you might do is you might rub your hands very fast and feel the heat, and you might sense that there's energy between your hands. And then you might practice going over your own energy field or that of somebody else's, usually within 3 to 6 inches of their body if they're comfortable with you doing that. And you can even do it with plants and animals, and they're happy to receive that support, because all you're doing is really giving them the pattern of perfection that is our essence. You're restoring their perfect essence back to their energy field.
And so can you tell, like without seeing that a plant is having a problem, can you tell? Can you tell if it's
before a botanist might say to me, this plant is ill, I might notice that there's a blockage in their energy field. I've definitely done healings on trees and animals in the past, yes.
And how would you assess that? Like, how does that work?
You can feel the field around animals, plants. These don't seem to have any problems. They don't need any attention. They're here just to bless us with their own grace.
Well, luckily, no, they're fake. So
see, that's why they have no problems.
well, so for example, my dog has congestive heart failure. Oh. So, would you? And I found a vet for her after many hours of searching that does alternative medicine. She does Chinese medicine as well as regular medicine. So she's being approached in different ways. And but how would you tell with therapeutic touch, like what she needs? And
so if you were working collaboratively with a bunch of other healthcare providers, I'd make sure that they're comfortable and you're comfortable with me doing this intervention as well. So it's another complementary approach, and it doesn't in any way make other approaches less effective or interfere with them in any way. So I would just assess the animal, your dog, and I would go over the energy field of your dog, and you told me that there's heart failure, so I probably would notice around the heart that there's something energetically going on around the field, that there's congestion. And so then we might unruffle that congestion around the heart, if that's the dog's situation. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So now, tell me, now you said you use a bunch of techniques usually when somebody comes in.
Right.
You assess the person. Is there any type of illness or complaint that you come across like commonly? Or
well, usually since I'm a counselor, sadness, depression, anxiety, those are the two most common things people come for. And then maybe addictions is the third most common thing people are dealing with. And often addictions are superimpositions of second problems on top of unaddressed depressions and anxieties. But sometimes they themselves create depressions and anxieties because it's difficult to bear an addiction of any kind.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so what would you use to work with an addiction?
So each person's different. So if a person's just wishing to talk about their addiction, we could talk about it. But the way we're going to talk about it might be a different way than some people might talk about it. Because while we're going to talk about it in a way that gets out information, the more important things are the energetic things that are happening when I'm with a client. So I'm creating a sort of connection, we'll call it, with the client. So within that connection, there's all kinds of energetic things, energetic dynamics that transpire, that happen while I'm with the client that they may not be aware of consciously, but that are changing them, because what it is I'm finding a way to get in resonance with their field. It's sort of like a mirroring or just a connecting with their own way of being in the world. So I'm finding a way to relate to them as they are, so I can be in their space with them without having to ask them to move out of their own way of being in the world.
Now, that's something I saw on your website that was really interesting, that one of the things that you do is offer assistance, like it's like in a physical way, you kind of accompany the person who's working through their issue.
Well, one of the things I like to talk about is I think it's so important for people to be not only acknowledged for their suffering, but that you actually enter into some of the suffering with them. Because part of the problem when people are suffering in any way, whether it's anxiety, depression, or addictions, is they're alone in that process.
Right.
And so to the degree that they're comfortable being joined and not being alone, which often is a secondary trauma of any kind of suffering, is the isolation. So I try to join them in their process of suffering so that they don't have an experience of isolation. And that can be very traumatic for people, to feel
Right.
all alone in their suffering.
I think that's really true, and it reminds me that a lot of times when you're around physicians, they take the total opposite approach, and it's self-protection, I know, of just kind of being clinical and pushing the person away who is suffering because they don't want to take it on. I know a lot of healers are, how do you protect yourself?
Right. And actually the healthcare providers who push others away aren't necessarily helping themselves if they're denying who they truly are in those moments. They just haven't been trained to know that they're even harming themselves. But one of the things you have to do is stay present in all of yourself when you're with another person who's going through something, or else you aren't then representing health in bearing this story that the other person's experiencing. So you have to be present in heart, mind, body, and spirit. I like to use elemental terms: earth, air, fire, water, or embodiment, inspiration, assertiveness, and receptivity. It's very important, I think, for people to be present in all of themselves with another person, and then that allows that other person to feel able to bear it because you're representing how to bear it.
So how do you know if you're present? How do you know if you're being present?
Yes, you can feel your own energy flow, just like I can assess the flow of you or a plant. If it's alive, it's got more dynamics to it, but or an animal, or a tree, you can sense your own energy field. So I know when my own energy field is flowing. I know when there's blockages, and so
How do you know?
I sense some kind of deficiency. In other words, I would say I don't feel very embodied right now, or I don't feel very assertive right now, I don't feel very receptive right now, I don't feel very inspired right now. Somehow one of my chakras, we can talk about chakras, I have 7 chakras, and we all do. So we have those chakras, we could feel like, well, maybe there's a block in one of those chakras. In Indian psychology, they talk about chakras, which are the energy centers that relate to different aspects of being. 3 of them are lower chakras, the heart is the middle chakra, and the 3 upper chakras above the heart. So,
and can you show the 3 upper chakras?
Sure. We have the crown, the third eye, and the throat chakra above the heart. Yeah. And each one of them relates to one of these elements I was talking about. In other words, I feel that the throat relates to the earth element, and I believe the third eye relates to the fire element, and the crown relates to the air element, whereas the heart relates to the water element.
So this is really interesting because I've never heard this before.
Right. I am a founder of this method of understanding the way things happen energetically. I've been studying it for 30 years or so.
So tell me about this. Tell me how the heart represents I'm forgetting the
water element.
The water.
So what it just is we have 7 chakras, and the heart is the mediator, and that puts it in the center. So really, water is the center of our being. We're actually, at our center, watery. We're made of 90-something% water.
Right.
So it's physical as well as energetic.
Right.
Because elemental method is talking, which is the name of the work that I do, talks about the things at the level of essence, but really on a physical level, we are primarily water. So the lower chakras are also, the root chakra is earth, and the Hara chakra, which is at the navel, is fire, and the chakra right below the rib cage, which is the solar plexus, is the air chakra. So, there's just
so
like below and above. Yeah, yeah. So you can even see how physically it's all connected. The chakras are connected to elements. So we have 2 of each element, and then the heart at the center.
So now how would you work with the elemental method?
So one of the things I do for a lot of people these days, from a distance, in person, whatever they like, on the phone, is I just can assess their chakras. I've become so adept at assessing the chakras and the flow of energy within each chakra, because chakras are like these spiraling energies in each of these energetic regions that correspond physiologically to hormonal secretion regions in the body, which I know less about, so I won't speak about that. But what I can say is, so I can assess from a distance or in person or on the phone, whatever is going on in their chakras, and I can give them suggestions, give somebody suggestions as to what might be beneficial for them to clear out a chakra at a given point in time. If I'm in person with them, there's more choices and options to work with. From a distance, it's a little less possible to...
Because why? Because you could do hands-on
I could do
things? Or
touch, I could
like
do more movement exercises that are in relationship to one another. There's different ways to clear chakras. And really, it's not a scientific system, it's an intuitive system, because the human body needs different things at each moment. Just like we need to say different things each time we speak. Everything is so unique.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So tell me, like, how would you work with say a person has depression?
Mm-hmm.
How would you work with somebody with the elemental method?
So let's say somebody was depressed and they asked or were interested in using an elemental approach to their depression. We might think about depression as somebody who has an excess of earth energy and a deficiency of air energy. So we might try to diminish.
Now, is that Chinese? That's kind of Chinese medicine.
It sounds Chinese and it has an overlap, but Chinese medicine works with wood and metal, and I don't know much about that. And I know astrology also works with the elements, but I don't know much about that. But what I do know...
How did you come into this?
It just came to me at some point from just being so interested in caring carefully for others in my work as a counselor and a healer for 30 years with all the other training. Because once you start doing energy work, you start picking up, as you said, a blind person might, you start picking up things you never knew you could pick up about another person's needs and situation. I can pick up people's life stories just sometimes by being in their presence, or even on the phone or from a distance. Someone can show me a picture of somebody, I can say, wow, they've been through this. You can just feel it. Yeah.
And is that something you always had, or that just kind
of...
of...
No, it evolved because I got such an awakening through my counseling training that I developed that in a deeper way.
How did that happen? Can you talk about that?
Sure. I had a transformational experience in my counseling training, because it was an unusual counseling training program. Most don't work anymore at developing the person of the therapist, but my training program focused primarily on the training of the person of the therapist. So we were in encounter groups on a really intensive basis, on a weekly basis, sometimes daily basis, long encounter groups with a facilitator and people free to do anything they wished, say anything they wished. And so all of your unexplored material comes up often when you're around people behaving in ways that you're not familiar with. And so it happened that there was an incredibly gifted facilitator, a very spiritual woman, who was facilitating one of these groups. We had rotating leadership. And at a time when I was just really suffering in a personal area of my life, she gave so much nurturing and understanding and compassion and sensitivity that I just broke open. I had been so close to my pain and suffering, and just, I said, wow, this is really different than what I thought my true story was. And so it changed my whole life.
Wow. Wow.
It was a great blessing, sure. So everyone is capable of having that if they need that. It's not, you can't predict when and how it will happen, but those kinds of things can be very common. They're rare, I think, for a lot of people. Some people get it in addiction recovery. They just say they felt like they were struck by something special when they had a moment of awakening in their recoveries. But it could be even more common, I think, if we allowed for people to receive these kinds of supports in their lives.
So can you, I just want to make sure we have enough time to touch on everything. Can you give a demonstration? You said when we were talking earlier, you said you could give a demonstration. And I know you said you work in different ways. Like today, we're going, because of just being on the set here, I'm going to sit in this chair and you're going to, I guess you're going to sit in that chair. I don't know exactly what you're going to do. But you have different ways of doing it too, right?
Right. So would you like us to do a chakra assessment of your chakras?
Sure. Sure.
That's it. And we'll see how you're doing. And if at any time anything I say or do makes you feel uncomfortable or feels inappropriate in any way, just say so.
Okay.
And that's the important thing, is that you feel you have a voice
Okay.
to speak your truth. And that's part of the process of empowerment, is even, unfortunately, in the traditional Western model, the client or patient feels disempowered because the power relationship is power over. And so this is shared power. It's collaboration.
Oh, okay. And so now the idea of this is you're going to unruffle.
Well, we're going to
Correct?
see your field.
Okay.
We're going to assess your chakras, and we're going to see what your chakras, how your chakras are doing.
Okay.
And if they're fine, we'll say so. If there's some blockages, we'll talk about it. Does that sound all right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I'm just going to start.
Oh, and you said, okay, so it's better
It
to
helps
just...
if you uncross your legs. Sure. Thank you so much.
Just put my hands
Yeah,
like
if you
that.
feel relaxed and you would like to relax your shoulders, that often allows your chakras the
right, I'll just go
maximal
like that a little
fluidity.
I'm just going to go like that a
That's
little
great. And while you're doing that, I'm just noticing your chakras, and I'm noticing the root is very clear, and that means you have a strong sense of safety. And I'm noticing that your Hara chakra is clear, which means you have a sense of powerfulness. You're conducting an interview that gives you a sense of power, possibly. And your solar plexus is clear, so that's a sense you have of freedom, and this is a free-flowing interview. And your heart chakra is very open, so you feel love for yourself, for others. And then we go to your throat, and that seems a little congested and blocked, I notice. So there's a way in which maybe you could just be aware without feeling badly to know that information, just to be informed and to be curious. And,
And does that have anything to do with, like, this weather making me, is there any connection to that?
Everything is connected. The world around you, the climate, the room we're in, it's a cold room. So if it makes you feel tense to be in a cold room, you could tighten up muscles around the neck. Anything is possible, but one of the things we like to think is that there's a whole host of reasons for something, and we're just seeing if we'd like, if you're comfortable, what's going on in your throat chakra. And we might just tune in more. If you're comfortable, I could tune in more to that chakra and just see if it's saying anything. And if you're comfortable, I'd speak to that. Is that all right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I sense that the throat is holding on to some sadness, and that's okay, because our bodies hold on to things all the time. It's not a judgment, it's a fact. And with support, because we can't do everything always all by ourselves, with support, when we're ready to receive it and find the appropriate resources, we can begin to release whatever it is we're holding on to. It's sort of like we can't let go of our luggage till we get to the place where we unloaded it at the airport.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to hold it. So it seems like as we're speaking, your throat chakra is clearing. I don't know if you can feel any changes, and maybe you'd like
I think
to think.
well, now I'm focusing on it. I think that helps too, right? When you focus and you think about, you just think about releasing it, which is what I'm doing.
Right. You're aware of your own throat chakra or your throat, and you just pay attention to it. And it's sort of all parts of our body are parts of a whole, and so they all like to be known as they are. So your throat is saying, thank you for knowing me. I'm a part of you, such a special part of you, because I'm your connection of your voice to the world. Yeah. So I think we don't need to do more on your throat chakra. We can go up to the next level, which is your third eye, which also is a little bit congested as I'm noticing it. And the third eye usually represents a sense of your own power in the sense of wisdom power, which is different than power to act. You feel a lot of power to act here with your Hara open, but maybe you feel like you're trying to learn some things here, and so maybe you feel like you need more understanding of things. It's all so new to you, and I'm sure to the audience as well. And you might say, where do I get more information? How can I learn more to have this wisdom that will give me the understanding that life is not just a physical thing, it's a spiritual thing, an emotional thing, as well as a cognitive thing.
So, and how do you fluff that or
unruffle it?
Unruffle it,
sure.
Yeah.
So we can unruffle your third eye by doing certain things if you're comfortable with doing that. I'm going to have you do a little bit of an exercise with me that I'm intuitively feeling. If you can just hold your hands like this, not tightly, like that, that may, and your shoulders relaxed, this may open up your third eye, because it does feel like the third eye is shifting as we're doing that. And I don't know if you can feel that, because that was
I can feel something. I can
yeah.
feel energy moving like that
Yes.
on that side.
So the right side is maybe more open than the left. And so maybe we could do that, and that will open the left side a little more, because this, again, isn't something you could do from a book. It's what you need right now. This is all about intuitive, empathic engagement with you. That I'm just saying, this is what your field needs, and it tells me. It's an incredible, our bodies have an incredible ability to communicate on a subliminal
And now,
level.
how is it telling you? It just
I
pops into your
feel
mind?
it into my heart.
Oh, you feel it in your
I
heart.
do things on an intuitive, empathic basis, and as we said, the heart is the true center of our being. So really, sort of my crown and heart, especially, are engaged in feeling or experiencing your story, your needs, and it's just your body saying, "Tell her to do this. Tell her to do that." It's really incredible what we can do for one another. You can do that for your baby when it's crying. There's so much we can do for each other in this world.
Yeah.
That's what's so beautiful about all this.
And so now, should I keep doing
You can
this?
stop it if you feel like it's shifted. You don't need to keep doing it if you feel better. But if you don't feel better, you might try this one now. This one might open it up to complete it. And if you can get the
That
thumbs up.
relaxes my shoulders a
Isn't
little
that
more.
interesting? And that might be something that helps the third eye open up right here, which, if people don't know, it's right between the two eyes, just above the eye, above the eyes, yes. So I don't know, how's your third eye feeling? Because it feels very much more open than when we started assessing your third eye.
Well, I think it's interesting because you're saying I'm trying to, and I am really trying to gather what you're doing, I guess, on, on every level, just trying to understand what you're saying to me. And so I do think that creates like a little bit of a congestion, yeah, because there's lots of stuff going on at once.
Sure, and it's all new to you. It's not like you have a
Yeah.
lot of background in talking with me and knowing my way of understanding
Right.
reality. Right.
So now what about the crown,
The crown.
chakra?
Okay. So what we see is there's a little bit of a congestion in the crown. So it seemed like today your upper chakras were having a harder time here, at least right now. And now you're just down to the crown, which has a little bit of congestion. And that's nothing to judge, because all of us go through different periods of congestion of all 7 chakras, or just one, or several. It's just how life moves. We get blocked, something upsets us, something distresses us, we're cold, we're unhappy, we haven't known our true story at a given moment of something that we saw that upset us, whatever it might be.
Oh.
Yeah.
This has been wonderful. We have come to the end of the show, and I want to
Yes.
thank my guest again, David Joseph Alpert. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us, and would you come another time and have a further conversation?
I would love to do that at your and my convenience. What
Awesome.
a joy it would be to do this
Awesome.
again.
All right, thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks for tuning in to Ready to Heal. See you next time.